I never thought I would need to tell this story, but after what I went through, I feel like someone needs to hear it. My name doesn't really matter. What matters is that until a few months ago, I was just an ordinary guy trying to start life on my own. I had lived with my parents my entire life, not because I wanted to, but because money was always tight. Temporary jobs, low pay, overdue bills, you know how it is. Eventually, I started to feel like a burden in my own home. On top of that, I needed space. I needed to prove to myself that I could survive without depending on anyone. That's when I decided to leave. It was exactly a dream come true. I wasn't moving into a nice apartment or a good neighborhood. I was moving because I had no other choice. Either I stayed in that suffocating situation, or I took the risk of living alone. Even without money, I spent weeks searching for something I could afford. Every listing felt like a joke. Places falling apart, rooms with no windows, abandoned buildings being advertised as studio apartments. I was almost ready to give up when I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I just have to accept anything. At that moment, all I wanted was a roof over my head, a place where I could close the door and breathe, without hearing arguments, without feeling like I was taking up space that didn't belong to me. I remember exactly the day I made the decision. I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table, staring at a cup of cold coffee, thinking about the future. I felt a tightness in my chest, like something was about to change, and I didn't know if it would be for better or for worse. I wanted a new chapter in my life. I wanted to start over. I wanted independence. And that's how, driven more by desperation than by hope, I began looking for a place to live without realizing that this choice would mark the beginning of the worst period of my life. I spent entire days scrolling through listings on my phone, almost out of hope. Every new place that appeared had a bigger problem than the last one. Too expensive, too far away, or simply impossible to live in. I was already starting to accept that I would have to back out and stay at my parents' house when one ad caught my attention. It fell out of place. The title said only apartment for rent. Urgent. I clicked on it. The photos took a few seconds to load, and when they finally appeared, I frowned. It was a simple apartment, but organized. A couch, a table, a refrigerator, a stove. Everything was there. It didn't look abandoned or dirty. The walls were a little yellow with age, but nothing that justified that price. The price was absurdly low. So low that for a few seconds, I thought it had to be a typo. I refreshed the page. The price stayed the same. I checked the address. It wasn't a dangerous area. It wasn't far from my job. It wasn't a forgotten neighborhood. Everything seemed too normal, and that's what bothered me. Questions started forming in my mind, and I couldn't answer any of them. Why hadn't anyone rented it yet? Why was it so cheap? What was wrong with this place? I kept staring at the photos longer than I should have. There was something strange about them, but I couldn't explain what. Maybe it was the lighting, maybe the angle, or maybe that uneasy feeling that the place looked too empty, even though it was furnished. I opened the comments section of the listing. No reviews, no questions answered. It was as if no one else had seen it but me. My finger hovered over the call button for a few seconds. Part of me told me to close the ad and keep looking. The other part said, it's this or nothing. So I called. The phone rang only twice before someone answered. A female voice, low and tired, spoke on the other end. Hello. I explained that I had seen the ad and wanted to know if the apartment was still available. There was a brief silence. A strange silence. Too long for such a simple question. It still is, yes, she finally replied. I asked about the price. She confirmed the amount without hesitation. That gave me a chill in my stomach. It was too cheap to be real. And yet, I felt that if I hung up the phone right then, I might never find anything like it again. Before scheduling a visit, I asked if there was any problem with the apartment. She took a deep breath on the other end of the line. "No, nothing serious," she said, after a pause that was too short to sound honest. "I just need to rent it quickly." I ended the call with a feeling that I had just crossed an invisible line. I had found the perfect place. Too perfect. And it was there, in that strange and cheap listing, that everything began. When I arrived to see the apartment, the landlady greeted me at the door with a quick smile, the kind that feels more like a habit than real kindness. She introduced herself, showed me the rooms, explained where the nearest market was, talked about the bus that stopped on the corner. Everything seemed too normal until, just as I was about to leave, her tone changed. We were standing in the living room, and she was gripping the keys tightly in her hand, twisting the keychain between her fingers. She stared at the hallway door for a few seconds, as if she were listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "Oh, there's just one thing I need to warn you about." I asked what it was. She took a deep breath before continuing. "The neighbor across the hall, she's a little strange. It's better to avoid contact." The way she said it made me uncomfortable. It wasn't a normal warning, like she's noisy or she complains about everything. It was vague, incomplete, as if she were hiding the most important part of the sentence. "Strange how?" I asked. She looked away. Old people stuff. Sometimes she just stands in the hallway. Sometimes she talks to herself. She's not dangerous. Just don't pay much attention to her." A short silence fell between us. I could tell she wanted to end the subject. She quickly changed the topic, went back to talking about the contract, the rent, the building rules. But that warning stayed in my head. Avoid talking to her. It didn't sound like advice. It sounded more like a request. At that moment, I tried to laugh it off, saying I had dealt with strange neighbors before. She didn't laugh back. Instead, her face turned serious for a moment, and she simply said, "It's better that way." I signed the contract a few minutes later. As I slipped the keys into my pocket, I felt a strange sensation, as if that warning was the only thing that truly mattered. And even though I didn't know why, something inside me told me that this first warning had not been given for nothing. That night, after bringing in my few boxes and spreading my things around the apartment, I was finally alone. I closed the door, turned the key twice, and leaned my back against it for a few seconds, taking a deep breath. It felt strange. This was officially my first day living on my own. The place was too quiet. Not the normal kind of nighttime silence you expect in an apartment building with televisions on or footsteps in the hallway. It was a heavy silence, as if the building were empty inside. I sat on the couch without a cover, eating whatever cold food I had bought from the market, and noticed how loud my own movements sounded. The crackle of the packaging, the creak of the floor, the sound of the spoon hitting the plate, everything echoed. That's when the loneliness hit. Not the peaceful kind of loneliness you feel when you want quiet, but a strange feeling, as if I wasn't really alone, as if the apartment had a presence. I stood up to close the living room window. Outside, the building's courtyard was completely dark. No lights on, no people passing by. It looked frozen in time. When I returned to the center of the room, I felt something change. A pressure in my chest, that irrational feeling of being watched. I looked toward the hallway. The bathroom door was slightly open. I was absolutely certain I had closed it. My heart started racing. I walked over slowly and pushed the door open. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. I went back to the living room, trying to laugh at myself. It's just nerves, I thought, first night alone. But the feeling didn't go away. As I tried to sleep on the mattress, still lying on the floor, every sound seemed too loud. A crack in the wall, the wind hitting the window, a creak coming from the hallway. And in the middle of all of it, there was that constant unease, as if someone were standing on the other side of the door, listening to my breathing. At one point, I quietly got up and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Even so, I went back to bed with my heart pounding, feeling that this night wasn't just the first one in my new apartment. It was the beginning of something I didn't yet understand. I was still trying to get used to the silence when I decided to go to the living room window. I needed air. I needed to see something alive outside to push away that suffocating feeling of being watched. I pulled the curtain aside just a little. The building's courtyard was almost completely dark, lit only by a weak streetlight that flickered from time to time. The shadows stretched across the ground, warping everything around them. That's when I saw someone. A figure standing right in the center of the courtyard. It wasn't walking. It wasn't moving. It wasn't doing anything at all. It was a person, or at least something shaped like one. It stood there with its arms hanging at its sides, its head slightly tilted back. What froze my blood was realizing that it was staring straight at my window. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't my imagination. Its face was turned exactly in my direction. I stood completely still, gripping the curtain with trembling fingers. For a few seconds, I was afraid to even breathe. The streetlight flickered again, and for an instant, the figure's face became clearer. It was someone extremely thin, wearing clothes far too dark for that hour of the night. Its body looked stiff, like a statue forgotten in the middle of the courtyard. I waited for it to move, to take a step, to turn its head. But nothing happened. It felt like that thing had been watching me even before I opened the curtain, as if it already knew I was there. I closed the curtain in one quick motion and stepped back. My heart was pounding, so hard it felt like it echoed through the entire apartment. I stood there for several minutes, too afraid to look again. When I finally worked up the courage and went back to the window, the courtyard was empty. No sign of the figure. No sound of footsteps, no explanation, just the same heavy silence of the night. But from that moment on, I knew one thing. I was no longer alone in that building. The next day, I tried to convince myself that it had all been just my imagination. Maybe it was just another resident standing in the courtyard. Maybe I was too tired. But that explanation fell apart the moment I left my apartment to go to the market. As soon as I stepped into the building's hallway, I felt an immediate chill. She was there, standing in front of the elevator, right in the middle of the corridor, as if blocking the way, the same figure from a night before. Now, in the daylight, I could see her more clearly, and that only made everything worse. She was wearing a thick coat, buttoned all the way up to her neck, a heavy coat, the kind you wear in winter. But the day was hot. The air inside the building was stuffy. Sweat was running down my back, and she was covered from head to toe. The fabric looked old, stained in places, and hung from her body as if there were nothing underneath it but bones. Her posture was strange. She didn't lean against the wall. She didn't move her feet. She showed no sign of discomfort. She stood perfectly still, with her shoulders slumped and her head slightly tilted forward, as if her own body were too heavy to hold up. When I finally saw her face, a cold feeling ran down my spine. Her eyes were too wide. They didn't blink. They didn't follow my movements. It was an empty stare, no curiosity, no anger, no emotion at all, as if she were looking through me, not at me. I walked past her slowly, gripping my keys tightly in my hand. She didn't turn. She didn't speak. She didn't move an inch. When I reached the end of the hallway, I found the courage to look back. She was still standing in the same position, as if she had never been a person at all, but only an object forgotten there. I tried to act as if nothing had happened. On the way back from the market, I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe she was just an eccentric resident. Maybe she had some kind of mental illness. Maybe she was waiting for someone in the hallway. Strange people exist everywhere. I told myself. I spent the rest of the day staying busy, trying to fill the apartment's silence with normal sounds. I turned on the television, let videos play on my phone, opened the windows to let in light. Anything that reminded me I was still in the real world. That night, I cooked something simple and ate without even noticing the taste. I forced myself to look at my phone, reply to messages, pretend that image wasn't burned into my mind. Whenever I remembered her face, the way she didn't blink, I took a deep breath and thought, it's just a strange person, nothing more. I avoided looking out the window. I avoided going into the hallway. I even avoided thinking about it. When I went to bed, I turned off all the lights and lay there trying to keep my eyes closed. But sleep wouldn't come. Every creak in the building sounded too loud. Every distant step felt like someone standing outside my door. My mind kept creating images. Her in the hallway, her behind the door, her standing in the dark, watching me. I turned over in bed and whispered to myself, tomorrow, everything will go back to normal. That's what I wanted to believe, that this strange presence was just a coincidence, that it had nothing to do with me, that I wasn't being watched. But deep down, I already knew, ignoring it didn't make the feeling disappear. It only made it grow in the silence. The following night, I was sitting on the couch, trying to distract myself with the television, when I heard 3 knocks on the door. Dry, slow, heavy. My entire body froze. I stayed still for a few seconds, staring at the doorknob as if it might turn on its own. The knocks came again. I stood up slowly and walked toward the door. I asked, my voice trembling, "Who is it?" From the other side came a low, drawn-out answer. "It's your neighbor." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear in my ears. I opened the safety latch just enough to see into the hallway. She was there, standing in exactly the same spot as the night before. Her hands folded in front of her body, her head slightly tilted, her eyes locked onto mine. She didn't blink. I need help," she said in a strange tone, as if she were reading from something invisible. I asked what happened. She waited a few seconds before answering. When she spoke, her voice sounded almost mechanical. "May I come in for a moment? It's cold in my apartment." It was impossible to ignore the absurd detail. She was wearing thin clothes, almost like light pajamas. Even though the night was freezing, I swallowed hard. I think it's better to call the building manager," I said. She took one step forward. "Just one." "No, it's better if you come with me," she said. "My apartment is dark. I don't like being alone." The hallway behind her looked longer than ever. The lights flickered, casting uneven shadows across her face. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. When she breathed, her chest barely moved. "Are you okay?" I asked. She smiled, but it was the wrong kind of smile. Too wide, no emotion in her eyes. "I just want to talk." My hand began to sweat on the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me to close the door. She stepped closer and whispered, "I've been watching you since you moved in." That's when I slammed the door shut. I locked every bolt at once. I leaned my back against the wood, trying to control my breathing. From the other side, I heard only one thing, the soft sound of dragging feet, followed by absolute silence. That night, I understood it wasn't just a neighbor asking for help. It was something that wanted to come inside. After a few minutes of silence outside my door, I heard her voice again, lower now, almost pleading. "Please, just 1 minute." Against all common sense, I unlocked the door. The hallway looked even darker than before. She was already walking away, slowly heading toward her apartment, without even looking at me, as if she knew I would follow. When I stepped inside her place, the smell hit me first. It was a mix of mold, old incense, and something metallic in the air, like damp rust. The apartment was almost completely dark, lit only by a weak bulb flickering on the ceiling. Every step made the floor creak. The place looked like it had been abandoned for years. There was dirt piled in the corners, strange marks on the walls, and furniture covered with dark cloths. There was no television, no couch, just a pile of objects scattered without any order. Then I saw the symbols. Crossing lines drawn on the floor with something dark. Melted candles forming circles. Crooked frames with religious images mixed with figures I didn't recognize. An open Bible lay in the middle of the table, but its pages were covered with strange symbols, as if someone had tried to erase the words with drawings. The air felt heavy, hard to breathe. She closed the door behind me. The click of the lock echoed through the apartment, like a gunshot. "Don't be afraid," she said, walking slowly to the center of the room. "This is where I protect myself." I looked around and noticed something even more disturbing. Dozens of photographs were taped to the wall. All of them were of the same hallway, of my door, of my window, photos taken from far away, and others from very close. A chill ran down my spine. The place didn't feel like a home. It felt like a twisted sanctuary, a space built to watch, not to live. The silence inside was different, thicker, heavier, as if the air itself were waiting for something to happen. And in that moment, I was certain of one thing. I should not have been in that apartment. She walked into the small kitchen without saying anything else. I remained standing in the middle of the living room, breathing in the strange smell of that place as it filled my lungs. I heard cabinets opening, glasses clinking, liquid being poured. "You must be tired," she said without looking at me. "I'll prepare something for you." My stomach twisted when she returned. She was carrying a tray in her hands. On it, there was a glass filled with dark liquid, too thick to be coffee, and a plate with something that looked like food, but had a wrong appearance. The smell wasn't like normal food. It was sweet and bitter at the same time, with a metallic undertone that reminded me of the apartment itself. She set the tray down on the table, right in front of me. "Drink," she said. "It will calm you down." The liquid was almost black. It didn't steam. It had no familiar smell. I looked at the plate. A piece of stale bread covered in a reddish paste, with small dark specks mixed into it. "What is this?" I asked. She tilted her head, as if she didn't understand the question. "It's what I always prepare for visitors." The word visitors echoed in my mind. I picked up the glass with a trembling hand. The glass was far too cold. When I brought it close to my face, a sharp, almost chemical smell hit me. My entire body rejected it. I'm not very hungry." I tried to say. Her smile slowly disappeared. "You need to drink," she replied, her tone firmer now. "Otherwise, you won't be able to stay here." Her eyes were locked onto mine. No blinking, no emotion. That's when I noticed stains inside the glass. Something dark clung to the sides, as if the liquid had been mixed with something solid. My heart began to race. "Can I take it back to my apartment and drink it later?" I asked, trying to sound normal. She took one step forward. "Here, another step. Now." The air grew heavy, the silence crushing. My hand shook so badly that a few drops spilled on the floor. When the liquid touched the ground, it made a strange sound, as if it were eating away at the old dirt. That was the moment I knew for sure. That wasn't food. That wasn't a drink. It was a trap, and I was sitting right in the middle of it. When the liquid hit the floor, something moved inside the dark puddle. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I saw it. Small worms began to emerge, writhing slowly, as if they had been hidden inside the drink. They spread across the dirty floor, leaving behind thin, shining trails. My stomach turned. I stepped back, knocking over the chair. "What is that?" I shouted. She didn't answer right away. She simply walked to the table and picked up the plate. Calmly, she turned it upside down. What fell out didn't look like food. It was dark meat, poorly cut, with uneven pieces and an unbearable smell. Among the chunks, there were strands of hair stuck to it, and something that looked like human tissue. My heart nearly stopped. That was when I truly realized what surrounded me. The walls didn't only have religious symbols. Some of the drawings were made with something thicker, darker. Old stains of dried blood formed circles, and words I couldn't understand. In the corner of the room behind a black cloth, there was a stack of plastic bags. One of them was torn. Inside, I saw the shape of something that clearly wasn't ordinary trash. It was an arm, or at least something that once had been one. My vision began to darken. "They need company," she finally said. Her voice was different now. Lower, emptier. "Who?" I asked, barely able to speak. She pointed at the walls. "The ones who live here with me." That was the moment I understood. The photographs, the symbols, the drink, everything was part of a ritual made with people. My whole body was shaking. The air felt too heavy to breathe. I wasn't in the home of a strange neighbor. I was inside a place where something horrible had happened and was still happening, and I was the next guest. After that revelation, something in her changed. Her body was still standing in the same place, but the expression on her face completely collapsed. She began to laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh. There was no joy, no humor. It was a dry, broken sound, like someone trying to imitate laughter without knowing how. Her head tilted aside at an impossible angle, as if her neck had lost all strength. Her eyes opened even wider, almost bulging from their sockets. "They don't like it when you notice," she murmured. "They prefer it when you drink." She started walking in circles around the room, talking to herself. "First you enter, then you accept, then you stay." The words didn't fully make sense, but she spoke them as if following an old order, a memorized script. Suddenly, she stopped right in front of me. Her smile stretched wider than before. Her lips were trembling. "Can you hear them too?" she asked. "Hear what?" I whispered. She pointed to the ceiling. "They are hungry." The way she moved no longer seemed human. Her steps were uneven, as if her legs had forgotten how to walk. Her arms hung stiff at her sides, but her fingers moved on their own, slowly opening and closing. Then she began speaking in another language, or something that sounded like one. Guttural sounds, broken words, syllables that hurt to listen to. As she spoke, her body shook as if something were trying to come out from inside her. The laughter returned, louder. "You are different," she said. "They will like you." That's when I noticed something that froze my blood. Her shadow on the wall was not moving with her body. While she laughed and shook her head, the shadow remained still, upright, with its arms spread open, as if it were waiting for me. I was no longer standing in front of a disturbed person. I was standing in front of something pretending to be human. And now, it knew that I had seen too much. My body reacted before my mind did. I took a step back, then another, and then I turned toward the door. When I tried to twist the doorknob, it wouldn't move. Locked. The metallic sound echoed far too loudly in the heavy silence. "No, no, no," I whispered, pulling harder. Behind me, her laughter suddenly stopped. An absolute silence filled the apartment. I could feel her presence without needing to look. "You can't leave yet," she said, in a voice that no longer sounded human. It was deeper, closer to my ear. I slowly turned my head. She was only a few steps away, her eyes wide open, her mouth twisted into an impossible smile, her body leaning forward like an animal about to strike. I ran to the other door, the one leading to the bedroom. I threw it open. Darkness. I tripped over something on the floor and almost fell. When I looked down, I saw plastic bags, the same ones from the corner of the living room. I heard footsteps behind me, dragging, uneven. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. "They want to meet you." I pushed the bedroom window, locked too. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I would pass out. She entered the bedroom slowly, blocking the only exit. "You came in on your own," she said. "Now you belong." I grabbed the first thing I could find, an old chair. I threw it at her. The chair passed straight through her body, or at least it seemed to. She didn't step back. She only tilted her head. Curious. That's when I realized. The floor was marked with symbols forming a circle around me. I was standing in the center. I ran back toward the living room door and threw my full weight against it. The wood groaned, again and again, until I heard the lock snap open. The door flew wide. The hallway appeared in front of me like salvation. But as I took my first step outside, I felt something grab my shirt from behind. Her nails dug into the fabric. "You haven't finished the ritual," she whispered into my ear. I screamed and tore myself free, ripping my shirt. I ran down the hallway without looking back. I heard her laughter echoing behind me, mixed with footsteps that no longer sounded human. I could think of only one thing. If I stopped, I wouldn't make it out alive. I ran without knowing where I was going. The hallways seemed endless, the lights flickering as if the entire building were alive. My feet slipped on the cold floor, and I slammed my shoulder into the wall, a sharp pain shooting through my body. Behind me, the footsteps continued, dragging, uneven, getting closer and closer. I screamed for help, but my voice echoed uselessly between the closed apartments. That's when I felt something grab my ankle. I hit the ground hard, striking my head, my vision blurred, filled with black spots. She was there, leaning over me, her face now completely distorted, her mouth open far too wide. Her eyes held no trace of humanity. "Stay," she murmured. "They're not finished yet." I tried to crawl away, but my body wouldn't respond properly. Suddenly, a door opened in the hallway. "What's going on out here?" A neighbor's voice thundered through the corridor. Then another door opened, and another. Lights turned on. People came out. She slowly turned toward them, and that's when something strange happened. Her smile vanished, her body stiffened, and she took a few steps back, as if being pulled by something invisible. "He went inside," she said, pointing at me. He saw. One of the neighbors called the police right then and there. I felt blood pounding in my head. The hallway spun. I heard sirens in the distance, then confused voices, hands gripping my arms. "Easy, you're safe now." When I tried to look toward her apartment, the door was open, but inside, there was no one, no symbols, no candles, no bags. It was an empty apartment, as if it had never been lived in. The last thing I remember is being placed onto a stretcher, the ambulance lights flashing over my face. My body wouldn't stop shaking. My throat burned from screaming. Before I blacked out, I heard one of the officers say, "There's no resident registered in that apartment." That's when the darkness swallowed me, and I realized maybe I never truly escaped. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital room. The white light on the ceiling blinded me for a few seconds. My entire body ached. My head throbbed as if someone were hammering inside it. A nurse told me I had been found unconscious in the hallway of my building, in a state of shock, dehydration, scratches all over my body, abnormal blood pressure. When the police came to question me, I told them everything. About the neighbor, about the apartment, about the symbols, about the food, about the chase. They exchanged silent looks. Then one of them said something that froze me more than anything I had experienced that night. There has been no registered resident in that apartment for over 10 years. I returned to the building days later, accompanied by a police officer. The apartment was empty. No stains, no symbols, no photos, no strange smell, only clean walls and absolute silence. I asked the building manager. He turned pale. The last person who lived there died alone. No one noticed for weeks. My stomach twisted. I left that place the same day. I never went back. I never looked for rent that was too cheap again. Now, months later, I still have nightmares. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone is standing beside my bed, watching me in silence. Sometimes I smell something strange in the air, the same smell from that apartment. And that's why I'm telling this story. Not to scare you, but to warn you. If a place is too good to be true, if it's too cheap, if it seems too perfect, there is a reason, and some reasons are better left undiscovered.